The fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the edge of the plate, a sharp metallic sound that sliced through the restaurant's low chatter. She froze, eyes lifting toward me with a strange mix of hope and fear, fingers still trembling from whatever she'd built up the courage to say. We sat in a narrow booth tucked against the window, sunlight streaking across her shoulder like it was trying to soften something that was already too tight to breathe. I had known her for 10 years, long enough to notice when she was carrying something heavy. She kept twisting the paper napkin, smoothing it, folding it, rolling it again, her breath catching every few seconds. When she finally said she needed to tell me something, her voice wavered just enough that the space between us felt fragile. "I'm bisexual," she whispered, her eyes searching mine, waiting for something, a reaction, a spark, a reassurance. What she got was my honesty, the blunt kind I've always lived in. I figured so. The words left my mouth quiet, simple, unadorned. I thought calmness meant comfort. I thought not treating it like a big revelation was the most accepting thing I could offer. But I watched her shoulders drop, not in relief, but in something else. Something I didn't recognize in the moment. Something that would come back to me later like a bruise forming under the skin. She smiled a small, tired smile. We finished our meals, paid, walked out. Nothing looked broken on the surface, but something had cracked the moment my reaction didn't match the courage she brought to the table. Morning light spilled across my bedroom floor, thin and pale, the kind that usually nudges me awake slowly, but that day it felt indifferent, cold. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a single vibration that should have meant something ordinary. Instead, it pulled a knot tight inside my chest the moment I saw her name. Her message wasn't long. It didn't need to be. She wrote that she was hurt, that she felt I wasn't accepting of her, that my reaction, my quiet, steady, "I figured so," made her feel dismissed. I sat up slowly, the sheets sliding off my legs like something giving up. My pulse thudded in my ears as I reread her words, again and again, trying to understand where things had slipped. The room felt too still, like even the air was waiting for my response. I typed back carefully, trying to make my tone softer than my instinct usually allowed. I told her she knew I didn't care about labels, that I was sorry if my reaction came across wrong, that I never wanted to hurt her. I added that I'm blunt, that I don't always read emotional need in the moment, but I could be present now if she wanted me to be. She didn't answer. Minutes turned into an hour, hours blurred into late afternoon. Every time I checked my phone, the same read receipt stared back, still, quiet, unmoving. By evening, I felt it inside my ribcage. Not guilt exactly, but a sinking awareness that my honesty had collided with her vulnerability in the worst possible way, that she'd handed me something tender, and I'd held it like it was ordinary. And maybe that was the first real cut between us. The soft buzz of my phone on the countertop broke the evening quiet, a low vibration that shouldn't have meant anything, but my chest tightened before I even picked it up. I wasn't expecting her, not anymore, but I still hoped. Hope makes fools out of people like me. It wasn't her, it was another friend. "Hey, is everything okay between you two?" I stared at the message, the words swimming for a moment before settling like pebbles sinking to the bottom of a lake. Slow, heavy, unavoidable. I typed a simple, "What do you mean?" But before she could reply, another notification appeared, this time from someone else in our circle. "She told us what happened. She said you didn't care, that you brushed her off." I leaned against the counter, fingers curling around the edge to steady myself. Brushed her off. The phrase hit harder than I expected, landing right under my ribs. I replayed the lunch again in my mind, the fork slipping, her quiet breath, the way she kept searching my face for something she never found. I thought my calm meant acceptance. I didn't realize she'd interpret it as distance. Another message flashed across the screen. "You should have said something supportive. She needed you." Needed me. That part lingered. I thought simply being there was enough. I thought quiet understanding was a kind of safety. I didn't understand that she wasn't looking for neutrality. She was looking for warmth, for recognition, for celebration. But I've never been good at reacting the right way. Not when emotions run high, not when someone needs something layered and expressive from me. My bluntness kept things clean. Her vulnerability needed something messy. I pressed the back of my hand to my mouth, grounding myself against the tightening inside my throat. For the first time, I felt the shift, not just her hurt, but the widening gap between us. Something small had broken, something neither of us noticed until it was already too late. What exactly did you say to her? The question came through the phone before I even said hello. No softness, no build-up, just impact. I held the device a little tighter, heat blooming in my palm as I recognized the voice. Jenna, the friend who never called unless something was already burning. I didn't say anything bad, I answered, slower than I intended. She told me, and I said I figured so. There was a sharp exhale on the other end. Not quite disbelief, more like disappointment she didn't bother to hide. That's all? You didn't say you were proud of her? Or that you appreciated her trusting you? Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was worse. It was certain. I closed my eyes for a moment. I didn't think she needed that. She knows I don't judge her. That's the problem, Jenna said quietly. You think people know things you never say. The words landed with a sting I wasn't ready for. I turned toward the window, watching a car pass slowly down the street, headlights stretching across the pavement like tired eyes. I wasn't cold, I whispered. I just reacted how I always do. I know how you are, Jenna replied, but she needed something different. She needed a reaction that matched the courage it took to say it out loud. Courage. The word shifted something inside me. 10 years of friendship. 10 years of trusting me, 10 years of carrying something she must have feared would change things. And when she finally let it spill, she looked at me like she was handing over a fragile truth she couldn't take back, and I held it like it was unremarkable. She's hurting, Jenna continued, more than she's saying. I let my hand fall to my side, the phone still pressed to my ear, silence pooling between us. I didn't mean to hurt her, I said softly. I know, Jenna said, but intention doesn't undo impact. The call ended a moment later, leaving me in the dim kitchen with nothing but the echo of those words. Impact, a quiet blow I didn't see coming. The kitchen chair scraped backward as I lowered myself into it, the legs dragging across the tile with a slow, uneven sound. I didn't mean to sit so abruptly, but my body moved before my mind caught up. My hands rested in my lap, fingers interlacing and loosening, unable to stay still. The conversation with Jenna kept replaying, each sentence cutting a little deeper the second time around. My phone buzzed again, a tiny vibration. Barely a sound, but I flinched anyway. It was a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in months, a casual acquaintance from our group. I heard things got weird. She said you acted like it wasn't important. Not important. That phrase hollowed something out inside my chest. I wanted to argue, to say I never treated her truth as small, but I knew better than to pretend intention erased the sting she felt. I leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes fixed on the wood grain. It felt strange. This weight, this heaviness that didn't belong to guilt alone, but to recognition. Recognition of the gap between how I understand care and how others feel it. To me, calmness is safety. Neutrality is respect. Steadiness is love in its most stable form. But for her, maybe steadiness looked like distance. Maybe neutrality felt like dismissal. Maybe calmness came across as apathy. The worst part was simple and sharp. She had brought me something that scared her, and I hadn't brought anything back. A sigh slipped out. Not loud, just a soft release of something tight. I rested my forehead in my palm, pressing lightly, trying to steady the pounding behind my eyes. The truth surfaced quietly without drama or denial. She expected me to meet her moment. I didn't see the moment at all. And now every silence between us carried the shape of my absence. The living room felt too large that evening, as if the walls had stretched just enough to make every corner echo. I walked in slow circles without meaning to, pacing, pausing, turning, then pacing again. My socks caught on the edge of the rug and I stopped, staring at it like it might explain why my chest felt tighter with every passing hour. A notification lit up my phone. For a heartbeat, hope flared. Small, instinctive, foolish. But it wasn't her. It was another friend. "She's really upset. She said your reaction made her feel invisible." Invisible. That word settled like a stone dropped into water, silent but deep. I sat down on the couch, sinking into the cushions as though my body couldn't support the weight of the message. The shadows in the room lengthened, stretching across the floor like slow-moving tide lines. I rubbed my palms together, feeling the rough drag of skin against skin, grounding myself. I thought back to the restaurant, the sunlight on her shoulder, the tremor in her hands, the way she kept waiting, eyes searching mine for something I didn't know she needed. And then the moment that keeps replaying, her face after I said, "I figured so." A split second where her expression flickered, something dimming, something closing, something I was too blind to read. My bluntness has never carried malice, but in that moment, it carried weight I didn't see. Another message arrived before I had time to breathe. "You should check on her again, but she's not ready to talk." A contradiction wrapped in helplessness. I let the phone slip from my hand onto the cushion beside me. It didn't bounce, just landed with a muted sound that matched the heaviness in my chest. Maybe she needed reassurance spoken aloud. Maybe she needed someone to celebrate her courage. Maybe she needed a reaction that mirrored the fear she'd been holding for years. But what she got was my neutrality. A tone I've always believed was safe. A tone that felt like abandonment to her. I leaned my head back against the couch, eyes tracing the ceiling. The quiet didn't comfort me. It pressed in close, reminding me that even the gentlest silence can become a wall when someone you love feels hurt on the other side of it. A sharp knock at my door startled me, the kind of sound that breaks through a room too quickly, leaving the air unsettled. I hesitated before moving, wiping my palms on my jeans as if that could steady the sudden tremor in them. When I opened the door, Jenna stood there again, arms wrapped around herself like she was holding back the rest of a conversation she didn't want to deliver. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside to let her in. She didn't sit this time, just hovered near the entrance, eyes sweeping the room before settling on me. Her expression carried something heavy, concern mixed with frustration, a softness stretched thin by too many truths shared between friends. "She's not doing great," Jenna said quietly. "She feels like you didn't see her, like the moment didn't mean anything to you." I swallowed hard, a shallow movement that barely made it down my throat. "I didn't mean it like that." "I know," she replied, her voice gentler. "But she doesn't. Not right now." The room felt warmer suddenly, as if her words raised the temperature around us. I crossed my arms loosely, not to block her out, but to keep the rising ache from spilling over. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could filter it. Jenna's gaze softened. She wanted a reaction. Not a big one. Just something that showed you recognized the weight of what she said. I looked down at my hands. I thought staying calm was the right thing. For you, maybe. For her, it felt like a dismissal. She paused. She was scared, and she wanted to feel held, not analyzed. Those words sank deep. Held, not analyzed. Two simple ideas, two entirely different languages. I stepped back, leaning against the edge of the table as Jenna continued, her tone lower now. She trusted you with something that could change how people treat her. You're one of the few people she believed would make her feel safe. When you didn't react, She felt alone in a moment she thought would bring you closer. The ache spread slowly beneath my ribs. I lifted my eyes to meet Jenna's, the room suddenly too still, too bright, too revealing. "I didn't think she needed reassurance," I whispered. "I thought acceptance meant not making it a big deal." Jenna shook her head, but for her it was a big deal. She stepped toward the door, giving me a small, sad smile. "Just give her space. And when she's ready, show her what you couldn't say that day." When she left, the door clicked softly behind her, a quiet sound that felt louder than any argument could have been. I stood there for a long moment, palms pressed to the cool surface of the table, feeling the weight of my silence settle into every corner of the room. The next morning, the sky was washed in a pale gray, the kind that makes everything look slightly softer and slightly sadder. I stood by the window with my coffee cooling in my hands, watching a pair of joggers pass by, their breaths visible in the cold air. Their laughter floated up faintly, light, effortless, untouched by the kind of heaviness that had followed me for days. My phone sat on the table behind me, screen dark, silent. She still hadn't responded. Not a text, not a call, not even a quietly reassuring, "I need space." Just nothing. I set the mug down and rubbed my thumb across the condensation ring it left on the glass tabletop, watching it blur at the edges. The urge to reach out again kept rising in my chest, sharp and persistent, but every message I drafted felt wrong. Too long, too careful, too late. Around noon, a new notification arrived. A photo. Someone from our friend group had sent it. A snapshot from her social story. A picture of her journal open on the table, a half-finished coffee beside it. And 3 words written across the page in thick ink. "I deserved more." My breath caught. The words weren't directed at me. They didn't have to be. I felt them anyway. The sender added, "Maybe check in later. She's trying to heal." Trying to heal. From me. From a moment I didn't realize required more than my quiet presence. I sat down, gripping the edge of the chair. My chest tightened as the memory of her face at the cafe flashed again. The quiver in her smile, the way her eyes softened for a second before something dimmed behind them. I hadn't been cruel. I hadn't rejected her. But the truth landed with painful clarity. I hadn't shown up in the way she needed, and need doesn't care about intention. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air thicker. I rested my hand against my collarbone, feeling the slow, steady beat beneath my skin, a reminder that even the calmest hearts can hurt in ways they don't immediately understand. Outside, a breeze pressed against the window, carrying leaves across the sidewalk like small reminders of things drifting out of reach. I didn't plan on running into anyone that afternoon. I just needed groceries, something simple, mindless, a task that didn't involve rereading old messages or checking my phone every 10 minutes. But the universe has a way of bringing things forward when you least want to face them. I had just turned down the produce aisle when I heard my name. Soft at first, then clearer, too familiar. 2 of our mutual friends were standing near the apples, their carts angled toward each other. I caught the tail end of a sentence before they realized I was close enough to hear. "She really shut down after that lunch. I don't think she's forgiven her." The word "her" hung in the air, unmistakably pointed, sharp like a pebble thrown without force but with perfect aim. Their eyes widened when they saw me. One gave an awkward half smile. The other looked down at her cart, pretending to rearrange a bag of carrots. "Hey," I said quietly. The one with the carrots cleared her throat. "We didn't know you were here." "It's fine." A lie that fell flat even to my own ears. Silence stretched between us, weighted and uncomfortable. I could feel the judgment wrapped inside it. Not cruel, but heavy. Heavy in the way people look at someone who didn't show up when it mattered. "She's been struggling," the taller one finally said, her tone careful. "She really thought you'd react differently." Humiliation flickered up my spine, Hot, immediate, impossible to hide. Not because they were attacking me, but because they were right. I tightened my grip on the shopping basket. I didn't want to make her uncomfortable. I thought staying calm was the best way to show I accepted her. They exchanged a look, one of those quiet glances full of meaning you're not meant to read, but you do anyway. She didn't feel accepted, the tall one said. She felt dismissed. That word again, dismissed. It echoed through the aisle, bouncing off shelves of neatly stacked fruit. I nodded once, slow, feeling something inside me sink lower. I never meant to hurt her. I know, she replied softly, but intention doesn't always change the moment. Someone walked past us, brushing the edge of my basket and jolting me back into myself. The two women shifted, unsure if they should say more or leave it alone. I gave a faint smile that didn't reach my eyes. I should finish up. They let me go, but I felt their pity follow me down the aisle, settling on my shoulders like a weight I couldn't shake. For the first time, I understood. The hurt wasn't private anymore. It had grown roots, spread, become something other people could name out loud even when she still wouldn't speak to me directly. And somehow that hurt more than the silence itself. I sat in my car for a long moment before turning the key, hands resting on the steering wheel, breath caught in that tight space between inhale and release. The groceries sat beside me, half forgotten, half useless, because the only thing I could feel was the invisible pressure sitting behind my sternum. The humiliation from the store didn't fade when I shut the door. It followed me, clung to me, settled into the quiet of the car like an unwelcome passenger. I tried to breathe normally, failed, tried again. The truth was setting in slowly, like bruises blooming under skin hours after the hit. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was becoming a narrative, a story I never intended to write, but somehow my silence had authored. My phone buzzed against the center console. A name flashed, not hers, never hers these days. It was Melissa, another close friend. Can we talk later? She's really hurting. I closed my eyes, letting my head fall back against the seat. The message was simple, but the meaning underneath it was layered and sharp. Everyone around her was trying to hold her together, while I was stuck holding the moment that broke her. I typed a quick reply. Of course. Then set the phone face down. The drive home felt longer than it should have. Every stoplight stretched into its own kind of silence, each one giving me too much time to replay that lunch, that moment, that expression on her face I didn't understand until it was too late. When I pulled into my driveway, the air felt heavy, thicker than the early evening should allow. I grabbed the groceries mechanically, but my hands moved slower, weighed down by everything unsaid. Inside the house, I set the bags on the counter and pressed both palms flat against the cool surface. The faint hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room, a low, steady reminder of how empty the space had become. I thought about texting her again, just one more message, something small, soft, human. But every draft formed as an apology wrapped in uncertainty, and apologies delivered too quickly can sound like pressure. Instead, I stood there and let the truth settle deeper. She shared a truth that cost her courage. I answered with a truth that cost us connection. And now we were both standing on opposite sides of a moment that neither of us knew how to repair. The doorbell rang just as I set a kettle on the stove. A short chime, too quick to ignore, too soft to prepare myself for. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked toward the door, each step slower than the last. When I opened it, Melissa stood on my porch, arms folded, hair pulled back like she'd come straight from somewhere that needed her attention more than I did. Her expression carried the same mixture Jenna had worn, concern edged with frustration. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I nodded and stepped aside. She didn't bother sitting. She paced once, small, restless steps, before turning toward me. "She's not talking to anyone except a couple of us," Melissa said. overwhelmed. And she keeps repeating the same thing. My pulse kicked up. What thing? That you didn't celebrate her truth, that you didn't even try. The words hit like cold water down my spine. I leaned back against the counter, fingers gripping the edge. I wasn't trying to be distant. I thought being calm meant being accepting. Melissa studied me for a long moment, her eyes softening even as her posture stayed stiff. I know you're blunt. I know you don't react big, but she walked into that lunch carrying years of fear. She thought your response would lift some of that weight. Instead, she paused, searching for the right phrasing. Instead, she felt alone. The humiliation tightened again, smaller this time, sharper, threading itself under my skin like something permanent. I didn't mean for that to happen, I whispered. Intentions don't always translate, Melissa said gently, and she's interpreting yours through her pain, not your logic. I looked down at my hands. Is she angry with me? Not angry, Melissa said, just hurt. Deeply. And when people hurt, they build stories around silence. Silence. Mine. Hers. All of it circling the same moment we couldn't undo. Melissa exhaled and brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She keeps asking why you didn't say something, anything, that made her feel seen. Seen. A word that cut deeper than any accusation could. I swallowed hard. I didn't know she needed that. Melissa's expression softened into something almost sad. That's the thing. She assumed you would. She stepped toward the door, pausing with her hand on the frame. Give her time, she said. But when the time comes, don't stay silent again. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving me standing in the quiet. Another reminder that somehow the world around her was saying what I hadn't. I pressed my palm to my chest, feeling my heartbeat push back against it, slow and heavy. And for the first time, I wondered if the silence between us was becoming something she wouldn't know how to return from. I didn't move for a long time after Melissa left. The house felt too quiet. Quiet in the way that makes you hear your own breathing, your own thoughts, your own mistakes replaying in slow, unrelenting loops. I walked to the sink and turned on the faucet, not because I needed water, but because the noise kept me from falling too deep into the silence. The kettle whistled behind me, a sharp, piercing scream that made me flinch. I turned it off quickly, hand trembling slightly against the handle. Even small sounds were hitting too hard now. I poured the water out without making tea. I didn't trust my hands to hold a cup. My phone buzzed again on the counter, just once. A muted vibration, almost hesitant. I reached for it slowly, hope rising like an instinct I hated myself for having. But it wasn't her. It was someone from the group chat. I know things are rough. Just be more sensitive next time. She's been crying all week. Crying. Because of me. The words blurred for a moment before sharpening into something that felt like a knife turning inside my chest. I gripped the phone harder than necessary, staring at the message until the edges of the screen felt hot in my hand. I typed a reply. I didn't mean to hurt her. Then erased it. Typed again. I thought I was being supportive. Erased that too. Nothing I wrote sounded like enough. Nothing could soften the truth unraveling around me. I set the phone down gently, as if any sudden movement might make the situation worse. My eyes landed on the coat hook by the door, her scarf still hanging there from weeks ago, when she'd forgotten it after a movie night. A soft gray wool scarf with frayed edges she always complained about but never replaced. I stepped closer, fingertips brushing the fabric lightly. It still smelled faintly like her perfume, warm, subtle, familiar. The humiliation from earlier, being talked about in grocery aisles, being pitied, shifted into something deeper, a quiet collapse, something breaking inside me that I didn't know how to name. This wasn't about a single sentence anymore. It wasn't even about my reaction. It was about a decade of trust she now questioned, a safety she didn't feel, a moment she needed, and I missed completely. I rested my forehead against the wall, eyes closed, breathing slowly as the weight of it settled across my shoulders. If she had cried all week, then every tear she shed had fallen into the space my silence created. And that realization hurt more than anything anyone else had said. I drifted through the house like someone moving underwater, each step slower, heavier, as though gravity had quietly doubled overnight. The floor creaked beneath my feet, a small, familiar sound, but tonight it felt sharp, too loud, echoing in ways that made the room seem hollow. I walked into the living room and sank onto the rug, legs folding under me without thought. My palms rested flat against the fibers, searching for something steady, something real, something that didn't shift every time another message arrived. The light outside dimmed slowly, stretching long shadows across the wall. I traced them with my eyes, anything to stop replaying the same moment. Her face in the restaurant. The way her eyes softened and then faltered when my response didn't match the weight in her chest. My phone buzzed again. I didn't reach for it. Not right away. I just stared at it, glowing faintly on the coffee table like something alive, something waiting to deliver another blow I wasn't sure I could absorb. Eventually, I picked it up. It was a message from an old friend, someone who rarely got involved in anyone's business. Listen, she's really hurting. She thought you, of all people, would celebrate her. She told us she felt stupid for hoping. Stupid. The word twisted inside me. I read the message 3 times, each reading sinking deeper than the last. My throat tightened, a slow burn building behind it. I pressed my thumb to the corner of my eye, not wiping tears, just holding the pressure there like a barrier. I typed a reply. Stopped, deleted it, started again, stopped again. What was I supposed to say? That I didn't know she needed more? That my version of acceptance has never matched what others expect? That her truth didn't shock me, but her hurt did? Nothing felt right. Nothing felt enough. I set the phone down beside me and pulled my knees toward my chest, resting my forehead on them. The room felt colder now, or maybe I had just stopped pretending it was warm. The collapse wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. A slow breaking inside my chest as I realized something irreversible. I thought neutrality was kindness. She thought it was abandonment, and no matter how true my intentions were, her pain was real, and it had settled into a place where my explanations couldn't reach. I stayed curled on the rug until the stiffness settled into my joints, a dull ache stretching from my shoulders down to my lower back. The house felt motionless, as if even the air chose not to move around me. I finally uncurled myself and sat upright, staring into the dim room, waiting for something, clarity, courage, anything to arrive. It didn't. But another message did, a long one this time, from a friend who rarely took sides, which somehow made the words hit harder. She told us she replayed the moment over and over. She thought you'd smile, or reach across the table, or say you were proud of her. Anything that made her feel like she wasn't alone in that moment. She said your calmness felt like confirmation that she should have kept it to herself. My breath stilled, a small involuntary freeze. Confirmation she should have kept it to herself. Those words pressed into me like a slow bruise. I closed my eyes, absorbing the weight of them, the sharpness, the quiet devastation tucked between each syllable. I had never wanted to make her feel that way, never. But wanting and doing aren't the same. The friend continued typing. I watched the dots blink, vanish, reappear, and then the next message arrived. She said she expected you to react the way she needed, not the way you naturally do. Something shifted inside me then, a mid-reveal settling into place. This wasn't just about her truth. It wasn't even about my reaction. It was about a mismatch of emotional languages we'd never acknowledged in 10 years of friendship. She offered vulnerability in a dialect I didn't speak fluently. I offered steadiness in a form she didn't recognize as care, and neither of us knew the other was speaking the wrong language, not until it hurt. I set the phone aside and pressed both hands to my face. The pressure grounded me, holding back a sting behind my eyes. I wasn't crying, but something close to it pulsed there, an ache trying to surface. The mid-reveal landed with a clarity both painful and unmistakable. She didn't want neutrality. She wanted celebration. She wanted warmth shaped into words I didn't think I needed to say. And in trying not to make her identity a big deal, I accidentally made her feel like it didn't matter. The collapse wasn't from her silence. It was from understanding, finally, the full weight of what I hadn't given her. I pushed myself up from the rug, legs unsteady, palms pressing into the floor for support. The room tilted for a moment, not physically, but emotionally, like the weight of every unsaid thing pulled the space slightly off balance. I walked toward the bookshelf without knowing why, fingers trailing along the spines until they rested on nothing in particular. Just movement, just something to keep me from sinking. My phone sat on the coffee table, screen dim, waiting. I didn't want to look at it. I also couldn't stop myself. When I finally picked it up, I opened our old messages. 10 years of conversation, stacks of memories, photos of birthday dinners, late-night jokes, voice notes from nights when life felt too heavy for both of us. Then the last message from her. Just a single sentence, already fading into the quiet. I was hurt that you weren't more accepting. I reread it slowly, painfully, line by line, like peeling back the edges of a wound I hadn't let myself examine fully until now. A wave of exhaustion rolled through me, the kind that settles behind the ribs and makes breathing feel deliberate. I sat on the couch and pulled her forgotten scarf into my lap, running my thumb across its frayed edges. The fabric was soft, familiar, worn, like a memory made tangible. I held it without meaning to, without thinking, just held it, because I missed her. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the quiet way you miss someone who helped shape years of your life, someone whose presence blended into your routine so smoothly that losing it feels like losing a part of the background hum of your days. The collapse wasn't loud. It was slow, controlled on the surface, rupturing underneath. The truth surfaced with a soft, painful clarity. She didn't need neutrality. She didn't need minimalism. She didn't need logic dressed as acceptance. She needed to feel held, celebrated, safe. And I had given her the only language I knew, when what she needed was a language I never learned to speak. I wrapped the scarf around my fingers, the fabric catching slightly on my nails, and whispered into the empty room, "I should have shown you." But empty rooms don't answer, and neither did she. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the house, a low, steady vibration that somehow made the silence feel even heavier. I sat on the edge of the couch, elbows resting on my knees, her scarf still draped across my lap. My fingers traced the same worn thread over and over, as if repetition could hold me together where words had failed. A notification lit up my phone again. Not her, never her. It was a message from someone who almost never reached out, someone quiet enough that their words carried extra weight when they finally stepped forward. "She thought you didn't care. She said your face didn't change. She felt stupid for hoping it would." I stared at the screen, felt the words land, felt something inside me give way, but quietly, like a rope loosening, not snapping. My throat tightened around a breath I hadn't meant to hold. I leaned back, eyes drifting toward the ceiling as though the answer might be hidden somewhere in the dim light spreading across the room. But nothing came. Just an ache behind my ribs that felt slow, internal, and sharper with each inhale. "She really believed you'd show some joy for her," the friend added. "She said that's what she needed." Needed. The word rang through me like a distant bell. I had spent years believing people appreciated my steadiness, my calm, my neutrality, my lack of big emotional displays. I thought it made me dependable, safe, predictable in a comforting way. But maybe predictability becomes a wound when someone is holding their breath, waiting for a reaction that never comes. I rose from the couch, legs unsteady, and walked toward the hallway. My fingertips dragged along the wall, grounding myself with touch because nothing else felt steady anymore. Halfway down the hall, I stopped, unable to take another step. The truth finally settled, full force. I hadn't just failed in the moment. I had failed the meaning of the moment, failed the courage she brought, failed the vulnerability she risked, failed the 10 years of trust she'd placed in me. This wasn't about orientation or shock or saying the right thing. It was about being present, being warm, being human in the way she needed. And for the first time since that lunch, I felt something crack open, a quiet, painful understanding of the wound I'd left in her. The collapse was complete, and what came next would require something deeper than apology. By the end of the week, the silence between us had stretched so wide, it felt like a separate room I kept walking into by accident. I tried to stay busy, laundry, dishes, reorganizing shelves that didn't need reorganizing, but every task left too much space for my thoughts to wander back to her. On Saturday afternoon, our group decided to meet at a small cafe downtown. I almost didn't go. I lingered by the door with my coat half on, half off, wondering if showing up would make things worse. But staying home felt like hiding, and the weight in my chest told me I had done enough hiding already. The moment I walked in, I felt the shift. Conversations faltered. Eyes glanced my way, then away quickly, as if everyone had agreed not to be the first to speak. I tried to ignore the tightness forming behind my ribs as I approached the table. She was there, sitting at the far end, hands wrapped around a mug she wasn't drinking from. She didn't look up. Jenna shifted in her seat, clearing her throat. "Hey," she said quietly, nudging the chair beside her. I sat down, keeping my hands folded in my lap to keep them from shaking. The group made small talk, forced, fragile, stretched thin as tissue. But underneath it all, there was a current running through the table, a tension rising like steam in the space between us. Finally, Melissa broke it. "Are we really going to pretend everything's fine?" she murmured. The table stilled. Chairs stopped shifting. Someone's fork chimed too loud against a plate. Then another voice, soft, hesitant, came from across the table. "She's been hurting, too." Her? Me. The fracture laid out in plain view. I swallowed, my voice a thin thread. "I didn't mean to hurt you." That was when she finally looked at me. Her eyes were red around the edges, not from fresh tears, but from days of carrying something heavy alone. "Then why did it feel like you didn't care?" The question landed like a blow, not because of accusation, but because of the pain woven into it. The table went silent. Even the cafe noise around us seemed to fade. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. "I cared," I said, voice unsteady. "I just didn't show it the way you needed." She held my gaze for the first time in a week. "You made it feel like it didn't matter." Her voice cracked on the last word, small but sharp enough to slice straight through me. The confrontation wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was the kind that hurt deeper because it was honest. A truth spoken in public because it had nowhere else to go. "I needed you," she said, voice trembling just enough to make every word land deeper. "I needed you to look at me and actually see me." The cafe around us blurred, not physically, but in that way environments do when the center of gravity shifts to one person, one moment, one truth hanging in the air. I felt my fingers tighten around the edge of the table, grounding myself as her words rippled across the space between us. "I did see you," I whispered, but it sounded thin, too thin to carry anything real. "No," she replied, shaking her head, eyes glistening. You saw information, not me. Not the fear I had carrying it for years. Not the courage it took to finally say it. You just nodded, like I told you the weather. The sting was immediate, sharp, precise, undeserved, but undeniably earned. Jenna shifted beside me. Melissa stared at her tea. Everyone knew this moment was overdue. I wasn't trying to minimize it, I said slowly. I thought staying calm was the safest way to respond. I didn't want to make it uncomfortable for you. Her laugh was small, broken. Uncomfortable? You think celebration is uncomfortable? I felt heat rise in my face, not anger, not embarrassment, but the quiet realization that my logic had collided with her vulnerability in the worst possible way. I didn't know you needed more, I said. I don't react big. Not to anything. It doesn't mean I don't care. I know, she said softly, looking down at her hands. That's what hurts the most. I know how you are, and for once I hoped you might step outside that for me. The sentence hit like a drop in the stomach. Slow, sinking, undeniable. She continued, voice steadier now, coated in weeks of swallowed emotion. Do you understand what it felt like? To finally say something I hid for years and get nothing? Not a smile, not a thank you for trusting me, not even a moment to show you heard me. The room held its breath. I heard you, I whispered, but I didn't feel heard, she replied. Those 6 words cracked something open inside me. Not loudly, quietly, painfully, with the precision of a truth I'd avoided acknowledging. I leaned forward slightly, hands clasping together to keep them from shaking. I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry. Not for the reaction itself, but for not knowing how much you needed from me, for not matching the weight you brought into that moment. She blinked, a tear slipping down so gently it almost didn't look like a tear at all. I wasn't asking for fireworks, she murmured. Just warmth, just something that told me I wasn't stupid for sharing it with you. The cafe faded into a hush. Even the clink of dishes from the kitchen seemed to soften. I never wanted you to feel stupid, I said, voice cracking. She looked up again, eyes tired, hurt, but finally meeting mine. I know, she whispered, but that doesn't change how it felt. And for the first time since this began, the hurt wasn't between us. It was sitting in the middle of the table, visible, undeniable. Something we both finally saw. She wiped the corner of her eye with the back of her hand, a small motion, quiet, almost embarrassed, that made my chest tighten. I'd seen her cry before, over heartbreaks, over family, over stress. But this was different. This wasn't grief caused by life. This was grief caused by me. I didn't know how much I was hoping, she said, voice thinning at the edges. I told myself it didn't matter how you reacted. I tried to believe it. But when the moment finally came... She looked down, fingers curling around the mug. My heart was louder than my logic. The honesty in her voice cracked something fragile inside me. I leaned forward just enough for her to notice, not enough to overwhelm her. I should have been there, I said, words slow, steady, raw. Not just physically, not just sitting across the table. I should have met you in the fear you carried. Her breath hitched slightly. I wasn't looking for perfection, you know that. I just needed you to meet me halfway. I know, I whispered, and I didn't. The reveal wasn't a secret being exposed. It was the truth finally settling between us. She hadn't wanted a performance. She wanted presence. And that, of all things, was what I failed to give. She shifted in her seat, shoulders falling in a soft, tired collapse. For 10 years, you've been the person I trusted most. I thought you, of all people, would make me feel safe in that moment. The weight of that sentence didn't hit my chest. It sank through it. I'm sorry, I said again, But this time, the words carried something they didn't before, an understanding carved out of days of silence and weeks of trying to rewrite a moment I couldn't change. I didn't celebrate you. I should have. I didn't think about what you needed because I thought being calm was kindness. She looked up, eyes glossy but steady. Calm isn't always kind. I know that now. A tear slipped down her cheek, and this time she didn't wipe it away. I exhaled slowly, the breath shaking on its way out. I care about you, more than you think. I just show it differently, and I didn't realize my different hurt you. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in. When she opened them again, something had softened. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first small loosening of the knot between us. I needed to hear that, she said quietly, and in that moment, the reveal became unmistakably clear. Her hurt wasn't rooted in what I said. It was rooted in what she needed and didn't receive. The cafe seemed to shrink around us, the hum of conversations fading to a distant blur. She looked down at her mug again, turning it slowly between her palms, a nervous habit I'd seen 1,000 times. But today, it carried a different weight, like she was holding on to it to steady herself. I didn't want to lose you, she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. The honesty in that single line hit me harder than every confrontation we'd had so far. Something in my chest pulled tight, a quiet ache rising behind my sternum. You're not losing me, I said softly. She shook her head. It felt like I already had. The words landed between us like a soft implosion, quiet, devastating, unavoidable. I wasn't pulling away, I said. I just reacted wrong. I didn't match the moment, but I never stepped back from you. You didn't step forward either, she replied, and the truth in her tone didn't sting. It sank. She wasn't accusing me. She was naming the hurt she'd been carrying alone. I swallowed, leaning forward slightly. I know I should have celebrated you, not analyzed you, not treated your truth like something I already knew. You deserved more. Her lip trembled just a little, enough for me to see the vulnerability she'd been hiding under all that silence. I kept wondering if telling you was a mistake, she whispered. It wasn't, I said immediately, voice firmer than I intended. You trusted me. That means everything. I just didn't rise to the moment the way I should have. Her eyes lifted to mine, cautious, searching, wounded. I needed you to care in a way I could feel, she said, and I needed to understand that caring quietly doesn't always translate, I replied. A few seconds passed, her breath steadied, mine finally matched it. Something softened, not fully healed, not fully restored, but enough to shift the tension in the air. I'm not asking for grand gestures, she said. Just something that shows you see me. I see you, I told her, letting every word land with intention I wish I'd had the first time. And I'm sorry I made you doubt that. The cafe noise drifted back into focus, the clink of cups, the low hum of conversation, the espresso machine steaming in the distance, as if the world had been waiting for us to reach this moment before daring to move again. For the first time all week, the distance between us wasn't widening. It was narrowing, slowly, cautiously, but undeniably. When we finally stepped outside the cafe, the late afternoon air felt cooler than I expected, brushing against my skin like something trying to settle the last of the trembling inside me. She walked beside me, not close enough to touch, not far enough to feel gone. Just that fragile in-between space where things aren't broken anymore, but they're not whole yet either. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Cars passed. Leaves shifted across the sidewalk. The world moved gently around us, unaware of how much had shifted in the past hour. She took a slow breath, eyes fixed on the ground. I wasn't trying to punish you with silence, she said quietly. I just didn't know how to talk without crying. Her honesty hit soft, unexpectedly tender. I nodded, letting her words settle in the air. "I understand," I said, "and I never wanted to force you to talk before you were ready." She glanced up at me, the faintest hint of relief softening her expression. "I know that, too. That's the thing. I always know your intentions. I just needed your actions to match them." A small ache pulsed through me, not sharp anymore, more like a healing bruise, tender but manageable. "I'm learning," I said, slowly, maybe clumsily, but I'm learning. For the first time since the lunch that started all of this, she smiled. Not a big smile, not a bright one. A small, tired, genuine one, the kind that says, "The worst has passed." We stopped near the corner where our paths usually split. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from vulnerability, finally finding space to breathe. "Thank you for today," she said, "for listening, for not shutting down." "You deserve that from the beginning," I replied quietly. Her eyes softened again, just a flicker, but enough. "I'm not asking you to be someone else. I just need to know you're willing to meet me where I am sometimes." "I am," I said. "I always will be." A breeze drifted between us, carrying the soft scent of coffee and the faint hum of the city. She pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, then hesitated. "You still have the one I left at your place, right?" I nodded. "It's waiting for you." She exhaled a small breath, somewhere between a sigh and a laugh. "Good. I'll come by for it soon." And for the first time in days, soon didn't sound like a door closing. It sounded like something opening again. When I got home again, the house felt different. Not heavy the way it had all week, but quieter in a gentler way. The kind of quiet that doesn't press into your chest, but settles softly around the edges of the room. I hung my coat, set my keys on the table, and walked toward the living room where her scarf still lay folded over the arm of the couch. I picked it up, smoothing the frayed ends between my fingers. For days, this scarf had felt like a reminder of everything broken between us. But now, it felt lighter, like it finally had somewhere to go again. I set it aside carefully and moved through the house, straightening cushions, wiping the counter, opening a window to let in the early evening breeze. None of it was necessary, but each small action softened something inside me. It felt like preparing, not for her visit, not yet, but for the possibility of something healing in its own time. My phone buzzed, just once. I reached for it, expecting another check-in from a friend, another quiet reminder of what I'd missed. But it wasn't that. It was her. A short message, simple, careful. "Thank you for today." I sat down slowly, the edge of the couch dipping under my weight. I read the message twice, then 3 times, letting the words warm, a place inside me I hadn't realized had gone cold. I typed back, fingers moving more softly than they usually do. "I'm here, and I'm listening." No overthinking, no explaining, just presence, the thing she needed from me all along. A few seconds passed, then her dots appeared, stopped, appeared again. Finally, another message. "I'll come by for the scarf this week. Maybe we can talk more then." A breath left me, long, steady, almost relieved. "Whenever you're ready," I replied. The breeze from the window swept gently through the room, carrying the faint scent of night settling in. I looked around the space, noticing how familiar everything felt again, like the world had been holding its breath alongside me and finally exhaled. Things weren't fixed, not fully, not perfectly, but something had shifted. A step toward each other, a softening of edges, a small opening where hurt had been tightening for days. And sometimes healing begins exactly like that, not with closure, but with the quiet courage to start again. The next morning, light pooled softly across the living room floor, warming the space where her scarf had rested the night before. I moved through the house with an ease I hadn't felt in days, opening curtains, letting the sunlight finally stretch into corners that had been holding too much shadow. I set a small laundry basket on the couch and began folding clothes, slowly, methodically. It wasn't really about organizing anything. It was about letting my hands stay busy while my mind tried to settle into the new shape of things. For the first time, the weight in my chest wasn't heavy. It was tentative, careful, almost hopeful. My phone buzzed once, vibrating against the wood of the side table. I glanced at it, half expecting another ripple of tension from the outside world. But it wasn't that. It was her again. "Do you still want to talk when I come by?" The simplicity of the question tightened something warm inside my chest. I sat down, letting the laundry rest in my lap, fingers brushing over the fabric without folding it. I typed slowly, choosing each word with intention instead of fear. "Yes, I want to understand you better, and I want to show up better than I did." I didn't try to apologize again. Not yet. Apologies can be heavy when repeated before healing begins. Instead, I chose clarity, presence. The things she had been asking for without saying it outright. A moment passed, then another message appeared. "I wasn't angry with you. I was just hurt, deeply, and I didn't know how to be around you after that." I inhaled slowly, feeling the truth of her words settle gently into place. I rested one hand over my chest, grounding myself in the steady rhythm beneath my palm. "I understand," I wrote, and I meant it in a way I hadn't fully understood until now. The dots appeared on her side again, stopped, reappeared. "I'm glad we talked, even if it was hard." My eyes softened, the smallest ache flickering behind them, not painful but tender, like the first stretch after a long period of stillness. "So am I replied. The room around me felt different, wider, warmer, like the past week had slowly begun to release its grip. I looked at the scarf resting neatly on the table, folded with a kind of care I didn't have before, and imagined handing it back to her, not as a reminder of how things broke, but as a quiet symbol of how they were being put back together. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive in grand reconciliations or perfect words. Sometimes it arrives softly, in small messages, in shared vulnerability, in the willingness to try again. And for the first time, I believed we could. She came by in the early evening, when the light outside had turned soft and golden, slipping through the windows like something gentle enough not to disturb anything fragile between us. I heard her footsteps on the porch before she knocked, light, hesitant, the kind of knock that carries its own apology. When I opened the door, she stood there holding her hands together, fingers laced tight. Her eyes met mine for a moment, wary, hopeful, tired. We didn't speak at first. The silence wasn't sharp anymore. It felt like a space we were allowed to share. I stepped aside and she walked in slowly. Her gaze drifted to the living room, landing on the scarf folded neatly on the table. I picked it up and held it out to her. "I kept it safe," I said quietly. She took it, her fingers brushing mine. Just a brief touch, but full of something we hadn't had all week, understanding. She held the scarf to her chest for a moment, like she needed to feel the familiarity of it before she could speak. "I'm sorry, I shut down," she whispered. "It wasn't about punishing you, I just didn't know how to carry the moment when it hurt." "I know," I said, "and I'm sorry I didn't carry it with you." Her eyes softened. She nodded, a slow, steady movement that felt like the beginning of something healing instead of something ending. We sat down, closer than we had expected, farther than we used to. She talked first, not about the hurt, but about the fear she carried before the lunch, the weight of hiding. The way her voice shook when she told me, and I listened, really listened, until her shoulders eased and her breath steadied. Then I spoke, not in speeches, not in logic, heavy honesty, but in the warm, careful truth she needed. "I care about you," I said, I just didn't show it in the way you deserved. But I'm learning, and I want to keep learning." She looked at me then, really looked, and something fragile eased inside her expression, like a knot finally loosening. "I believe you," she said softly. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. We didn't force the moment to be more dramatic than it needed to be. We just sat there, in the soft evening glow, letting the quiet rebuild what the silence had broken. When she stood to leave, she paused at the doorway, hand resting lightly on the frame. "I'm glad I came," she murmured. "So am I." She stepped outside, the breeze lifting the edge of her scarf as she walked toward her car. I watched until she disappeared around the corner, her silhouette fading into the warm dusk. Then I closed the door slowly, my fingertips resting against the wood for a lingering second. The house felt different again. Not empty, not heavy, just settled. And in that final quiet, a soft echo remained. Some moments break us, some moments mend us, and some moments teach us how to show up better for the people we love. A quiet pause, just enough to hold what needed holding, and let the rest drift gently into the evening.